Hey, welcome back to Rethink Vertical. I'm Kinsley Jordan, your state director for the UAS Cluster Initiative and host of this amazing podcast where we talk to so many who have been in the UAS space and are actively in the UAS space, advanced air mobility, unmanned aerial vehicles, drones. You know, if this is your first time tuning in, that's totally fine because we talk to anybody and everybody in this space to see what's actually happening, not only in the state of Oklahoma, but also in the industry itself. And I'm telling you, I could not be more excited to be able to present this episode where we have the chance to be able to sit down with Tulsa Innovation Labs, an amazing crew of leaders who are doing truly nationally leading efforts to be able to grow ecosystems of UAS, advanced air mobility, and so much more. Autonomy, tech hubs, I mean, we're going to talk about it. But without further ado, we had the chance this last week to be able to sit down with John McDonald, head of strategy and initiatives there at Tulsa Innovation Labs, as well as Patrick Hosford, who oversees infrastructure as a senior associate. And last but certainly not least, Justin Kitts, Director of Public Affairs. I'm telling you, it was not only a lively conversation, but there was so much knowledge that was gained of what was happening and what is happening in the innovation space there at Tulsa. So join us, get ready, buckle up, settle down, grab a cup of coffee. You're going to enjoy this conversation. I promise you, starting right here, right now with Tulsa Innovation Labs on Rethink Vertical. Hey, welcome back to the UASCI podcast, bringing you not only the information that you are looking for here in the UAS space, but also connecting you to the people who are making it happen. And I could not be more excited to welcome to the podcast the Tulsa Innovation Lab crew who here is with me. I'm going to have them all introduce themselves as we go around and dive into it because, guys, there's so much happening right now in Tulsa. There's so much that you have your hand to. It's not overwhelming, but to somebody who doesn't know, they need to know. Honestly.
Oh, it's overwhelming. Don't worry about that.
Well, let's start with that delicious voice right here. Go ahead.
Hi, this is John McDonald. Great to be here today. I head strategy and initiatives for the Tulsa Innovation Lab here.
Nice. That's a cool title.
I love it.
Nobody's ever given me
business
that
card too.
Yeah.
And I'm Patrick Hosford. I oversee our place and infrastructure portfolio. So you can think of that everything from our applied research centers to our testing facilities and advanced manufacturing facilities. So from ideation to testing to manufacturing, we oversee an initiative in it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Patrick.
Great, and I'm Justin Kitts. I lead public affairs for TIL, and that means pretty much anything public sector. And I also had the privilege of leading the recent Tech Hubs effort that, as you know, resulted in the big designation and then $51 million in implementation funding for Tulsa.
Yeah, no big deal. Just a weekend habit. It happens to be what you do. That's awesome. The voice of innovation sitting across from me. That's great. Awesome. Well, as we do dive into this, one of the things that we focus on within UASCI is building the connections and building that economic impact across the state. And for anybody who's been in the space, they've heard Tulsa Innovation Labs for a long time. They know that Oklahoma is making huge investments into planting the flag for UAS, unmanned aerial systems, unmanned aerial vehicles, advanced air mobility. But for a lot of people might not know, they haven't had the opportunity like I've had today with Patrick to go around and see the awesomeness that's happening. So we'll just start very basic. What is Tulsa Innovation Labs and where did it come from?
I have no idea. I'll take that one since you guys are the experts on all the rest. So Tulsa Innovation Labs started about 4.5 years ago at this point. It was created by the George Kaiser Family Foundation, which is a huge philanthropic engine here in Tulsa, Northeast Oklahoma, and we're deeply grateful that they did. That foundation really began its work in early childhood issues, as George Kaiser calls it, the ovarian lottery. How do we kind of equal that out? But over time, it's grown to being able to also cover off on issues about growing and building a family, job opportunities and the like here. And so really out of that is where TIL comes from. It's really about trying to catalyze different initiatives that all lead to creating opportunity for all, and in particular job opportunities for all.
Wow.
And so there's been some projects that they began with as an organization. A few years ago, we had the privilege of winning a Build Back Better regional challenge grant for about $41 million that fueled a whole nother set of initiatives with our partners in the community. And then most recently, we're able to be designated a tech hub out of about what was it, just about 330 cities posted up for that. They picked 31, which didn't really get us anything other than a bunch of work to go after getting more money. And we were able to secure a little over $50 million in additional funding as a part of that, as one of only 12 cities that received funding in that grant, and one of only 3 cities that actually received both of those grants from the ADA. So we're in a very elite crowd with all that.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot to take on. So it's not only in the UAS space, but also really the focus is across Tulsa, which is amazing. I've had this question before. I didn't know what the answer was, so I'm excited to ask you. Is there anything comparable to what Tulsa is doing in the nation?
Well, from an organization perspective, there are other system hub organizations in a lot of other cities, sometimes more than one in some of the larger cities. But to have the system hub like this, we're in rarefied air on a lot of levels. Not only that it was founded and created by a private foundation to start it, that we've had such buy-in, if you will, from such a broad cross-section of our community, higher ed, corporate partners, both local and otherwise. And more importantly, the track record of success of winning these federal grants, there's really nothing in Oklahoma like it, I can tell you, for sure, and probably rare in the United States to have that kind of a thing going on.
I find that often when we go out of state and describe what's happening, people are like, no way, no way.
Right,
and you're like, no
way,
really, you need to look at you need to look at it.
Way.
It's true. It's true. Very much true. So when you look at what all you are involved in, I guess most importantly, what all has already been accomplished, you have your hands full at this point. Somebody who is outside looking in, what would you say? What would you do here? What do you do here, Bob, when you're focusing on all of these projects and all of these amazing efforts that clearly there's been enough support to be able to say, hey, you guys are the ones, your team is the one that needs to have this money to be able to accomplish this?
I think it'd be great for Justin and Patrick to share some examples. I would say overall our role is catalyst. We are neither the funders of these things nor are we the operators of them, right? We work with our partners who are both the sources of those resources as well as the problems to be solved, if you will. And so our job is to catalyze an answer to a problem. And that means that we live and die through the relationships that we build and maintain with these folks, right? Yeah. So I think there's some, maybe some examples you guys could share of how that catalyzation works.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is when we think about other communities, the way we've attacked problems holistically. Not only, I think, at a very deep level and maybe root level at the community foundation, so Tulsa Community Foundation and George Kaiser Family Foundation, they're looking at root causes of things. And how we've been able to do that sectorally, I think, is completely unique in the UAS space.
Wow.
So a lot of regions are tackling little bits and pieces of this. But we're understanding that UAS, and I think collectively, if you ask any regulatory body or even ideator and folks who are embedded in the research, they're realizing that these problems take a holistic approach to implement and to scale this technology here in the U.S.
Yeah.
So the fact that we're doing that kind of in the catalyst and steward and strategic role that John mentioned is great, and really where we find ourselves, because we attach ourselves to universities, we attach ourselves to companies that are so deeply invested in the problem set of the holistic nature of it, of the smaller pie, that for us to look at the bigger pie is where we really garner our power and where we can start to make an impact.
Yeah, I remind me to come back to this because there's a lot to unpack with when you say the holistic approach, because I think what that means for the layperson is it is a lot of communication that is very difficult sometimes, working with so many different organizations, not competing priorities, but each organization focuses on what it does best. So people have different priorities at times, and you get to be the big brother in the middle to say, or big sister in the middle to say, okay, everybody, we need to make this work. Let's do this together. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. I think you're shaking your head a lot with agreement to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the Tech Hub grant program, that we applied for and received is such a perfect example of what both John and Patrick have been talking about. For those not familiar with that program, it was included in the CHIPS and Science Act that was passed 2 years ago. So alongside a lot of that semiconductor funding that's getting most of the headlines. And the Tech Hub program was really premised around something similar, that the United States needs to lead in the technologies of the future, and it needs to prepare and strengthen its national security through economic competitiveness. And so the U.S. Economic Development Administration, which is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, went around and said, okay, as a region, define what your competitive advantages in technology and how you can become globally competitive in approximately 10 years. And so we proposed what our technology area, which is around cyber secure autonomous systems. But what we're really talking about here is UAS and drones. That's where our region's strength lies. And so we brought together over 75 partners through that process, spanning universities, community college, technical college, private industry, workforce partners, economic development, state and local government, you name it, to say, how can the 12 county region here around Tulsa come together and build the drones of the future? And so, that $51 million that we received is going to go to things like workforce training programs. How can we get industry-ready individuals in jobs faster? It's going to go to testing platforms, creating globally unique ranges here in Northeast Oklahoma where you can not only come fly beyond visual line of sight, but we're going to give you cyber red teaming capabilities as well. It's going to expand DoD contracting opportunities and cyber certifications for drones. And perhaps most importantly, we also hope it's going to reshore those critical UAS and critical component supply chains. Our region is one of the aerospace manufacturing hubs in this country, and we think that gives us a unique set of skills to bring that back to the U.S. And so ultimately, what we're trying to achieve through this strategy is we hope that in 10 years from now, there are going to be autonomous systems in use worldwide, whether it's protecting Americans on the battlefield or delivering medicine to rural Oklahomans that bear the moniker Tested and Made in Tulsa, USA.
Wow. Oh my gosh, you better say that again. That was too good. What was that?
Tested and Made in Tulsa, USA.
Oh man, that's got to flash across the screen right now.
I'm reserving the domain name right now.
That's too good. Honestly, in this conversation, there's been many talking for a long time about what UAS means, what the market potentially means, what the industry is, and I think the more it's talked about, the more questions I have, and maybe that's just not just me, because there's so much development required to build a thriving ecosystem that's able to support it. What are some of those challenges when going back to the holistic approach? What are some of those challenges that you have had, knowing that you're a couple years into this now, but doing something that has national publicity to it? What are some of those challenges in working those, not just relationships, but also moving forward, considering there's so much to build, from testing facilities to policy approval to partnerships and making sure that everybody's working and playing together? What are some of those challenges where you're meeting right now, considering, to your point earlier, there's so many efforts?
I assume you don't want to talk about the FAA.
Well, since you brought it up,
I can be neutral as far as mentioning regulatory bodies. So, I think the challenge here is that the sector is ever evolving, and because the sector is evolving, it's a moving target. And then you also have to tailor your interventions to a sector that's still coming of age and finding really where its niche is. And this is all, I think, shadowed and really impacted by some of the global events which are taking place, not only the pandemic, which had some fluctuations on the commercial economy, but two global wars that are taking place, and the need for UAS technology and how that's coming about and really maturing, not on the commercial side, but on the public side, and especially on the battlefield. So I think if we're thinking some of the challenges, it's rescoping scoping and rethinking and moving in tandem with the industry that is truly being shaped, not domestically on the commercial front, but globally, I think on the public front. So some challenges I think there is ensuring that we're walking in lockstep with federal priorities, not on the regulatory side, but really where the federal spend is going, considering over 80% of the market for drones is coming from the government and the defense sector abroad. We have to ensure that our interventions speak to some of that. I think there is challenges where it's how do we, there are unique commercial challenges. I don't want to mitigate those, where it's how do we ensure that, the drones as a service is aligning with our Part 107 curriculum, which is also aligning with current needs. So and maybe I'll actually use an example there. So on the commercial front, we've been able to mitigate some of that by looking and talking with what are the skills you need today while also ensuring that we have the skills for tomorrow. Yeah. Meaning that we've created curriculum, and I'll call out Tulsa Technology Center here. Yeah. They've created an AM Advanced Mobility Associate Certificate program that not only embeds Python PLC language so that that person and individual and student can go work on the operator floor of a manufacturing center, but then they also embed Part 107 curriculum, embedded systems as well. These are courses where you actually get a drone your first day of class. You essentially deconstruct it, learn the embedded technology, reconstruct it, and then fly it your last day as you're gearing towards a Part 107, all while you're learning PLCs too. So you can go towards the shop floor and work on a CNC as well. So there's the sort of duality with sectors too, where there are transferable skills that are coming out of this on the commercial side, which we're seeing, and identifying those challenges too, so that it isn't a static curriculum, or it isn't answering to industry needs. I think there's a world in which, we might face challenges where, everything's, pretty different and these skills are bifurcated. But really what we're seeing is advanced economies are based on a blending of skills and a blending of technology. And we know that too. So I'm going to leapfrog here back to a previous point. There is a world in which, kind of dual technologies and dual use that the defense sector often touts, and that we want to rally behind here too. So ensuring both are working in tandem and mitigating that challenge so that, the public sector can fuel the private sector, but the private sector is also listening to those headwinds and notifications. So I think the biggest challenge here, and a challenge collectively, is ensuring we're listening to all sides. Yeah.
Well, and to put a fine point on what Patrick's saying there, we think we have the unique set of assets and partners here in the Tulsa region to unlock widespread commercial deployment of UAS. Jokes aside, the FAA is doing a great job figuring out what the regulations look like in the national aerospace system, right? But we have the testing environments that are going to move from rural flying over nothing to downtown Tulsa and complex urban use cases, right? Which is what Amazon and Walmart and all these other package delivery companies are going to have to figure out if they're going to reach commercial scale. We're working with the mayor's office here in Tulsa with their Blue Ribbon Drone Commission to figure out, okay, FAA is setting the rules in the sky, but what are our right-of-ways look like? How are we investing in our infrastructure to enable the use and deployment of autonomous systems? Right. And then, of course, all the educational and workforce partners that Patrick mentioned. So we think we, different from other regions, have a strategy to really unlock widespread deployment of these systems.
Yeah. Speaking of the strategy, when you look at the ability to be able to expand out and reach differently, it's one thing to have a testing facility. It's another thing to have somebody, an organization that is focusing on it. It's different to have all of those aspects in one place as you do, and then navigate those relationships and challenges along the way. In your experience thus far, each of you have, I don't want to say grown up in this aspect of helping economic development, but how is this so drastically different?
It's a term that the industry is using called place-based economic development, and it's a relatively new thing. It's not the norm or the tradition. Economic development is often, they like to call it smokestack chasing, right? I've got this tech park out by the freeway, and I want to lure the screw factory from Illinois to move here, kind of a thing. And the problem with that is not only being brain dead, it's actually a negative sum game, because if you use tax incentives to lure the screw factory from Illinois, what did you win? Well, you won a screw factory that now competes with all the other screw factories we had, and also is somewhat subsidized by the government, making the other ones a little less competitive, right? And so it's really not great. And so the only way to grow your economy is to grow your economy. And so the new trend, emerging trend, is to be able to take a look at the assets that you have. What are your advantages? What are your unique strengths? And work to collectivize those together, put a strategy around it, and then work to fill in the blanks in that story so that you have a complete picture for that fertile ground, basically, for something to grow. And that's really what is going on here with these tech hubs things. And it's essentially getting behind a place-based economic development strategy. The other thing that's feeding into this is the ideas of economic development, philanthropy, and I would say entrepreneurship are often thought of separately in a lot of communities. They have their own mechanisms and their own winners and losers, their own acronyms, all that sort of stuff. But there's a growing community of practice in a way that is starting to think of those things not as three things, but as one. Right. How do you get, how do you get the triple bounce, right? That comes from the unification of economic development, entrepreneurship, and social philanthropic support. So that's what's leading. That's what we're doing here, behind the scenes. That's not the visible part of it. That's the practice that's being experimented with here in Tulsa.
Well, hitting the nail on the head, the practice being experimented with. It's one thing to build a model off of something that already exists. It's another to know it needs to exist, but not have a model to build off of. And that's what, from a pioneering sense, I mean, that's essentially what's happening here is when you have these cross sections of what was used to be thought as independent focuses, somebody has to navigate those middle grounds. And it is proving successful because, am I wrong? It was from a previous conversation that was able to get the designation for autonomous tech hub. Is that right?
Yep.
Tell us about that, because when I hear tech hubs, I think of big cities. I think of Dallas. I think of New York. I think of not that I don't think of Tulsa, but it's kind of like, oh, well, Tulsa tech hub. Wait a minute. No, wait. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the program I was mentioning before that was included in the Chips and Science Act, and you're totally right. Candidly, even as a native Tulsan, Tech Hub is not my first association with Tulsa, but you really have to remember why we're doing this. First, when you look at Oklahoma compared to the national economy, our average wages are $15,000 lower. That number has actually doubled in the last 10 years. Our growth rate is at 4% over the last 10 years versus 10% for the nation. And so there's an urgency for us to make sure that our community is more competitive in advanced technologies. And that's what the Tech Hub program is about, but it's really more about the grant itself. It's about the strategy that TIL is trying to work with partners from across the region and across the state to implement. And, we think that we have been successful for a lot of the reasons that you've heard from John, Patrick, and I. The unique set of partnerships that we are able to bring to the table, the testing assets and other industry-specific things here in our region, and really just an ability to coalesce as a community. Like I mentioned before, over 75 partners came to the table and said, yes, we believe in Tulsa's future in this industry. I think that's really what has made us successful. And then, quite frankly, the federal government and Congress as well deserve a lot of credit for really focusing these type of programs and these type of policies at expanding economic opportunity outside of where you would expect it. The big cities, the Silicon Valleys, etc.
Yeah.
So a lot of these programs are targeted specifically at communities like ours, where it's what we as Tulsans have known for a long time, that we're legit and we can compete with the Philadelphias, Chicago's, Denver's of the world, even globally. And then investing resources behind coalitions like the one TEIL is leading to achieve those goals.
Yeah, it's there's something special in the water.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
By in the water, I mean sitting around this table right now, because you guys are truly rock stars. Okay, in our last closing minutes, one thing I like to ask each and every time, which is a little bit of transparency, but and not necessarily fun to talk about, but is one thing, what are you hopeful for, and also what are you fearful of? For me personally, even in this director role, I think of, I know what I'm hopeful for. I know how I want us to grow and what I hope happens in the next year, but then I have my concerns of, what if something changes economically? What if something changes? What if there's a turn, a change? What would that be for Tulsa? Somebody who's looking at Tulsa Innovation Lab and saying, "Hey,
yeah. I'm really hopeful about what this work can mean for the future of my community." Like I said, I'm native Tulsan. Quite frankly, I did the brain drain game for a while out in DC, but have moved back and really am so thankful that I'm back home. And one of the reasons I did the brain drain thing is because like I said, I didn't sort of associate these type of opportunities with my community. And I think we're really turning the page on that, and I'm really hopeful that we can use opportunities like tech hubs to expand economic opportunity in the Tulsa region, but then also reach folks that have historically been left out of that out of our economic prosperity in our region. What I'm worried about is meeting the moment and making this actually come to fruition. We've been really fortunate to receive these grants and get a lot of attention. And now is the hard part. Now we have to stand up the workforce programs and train people. We have to build the next generation of aerospace companies here. We have to become the hub that EDA says they think we can become. And so there is something in the water right now. Tulsa is definitely having a moment, and I'm really worried about missing it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'll add, maybe never good to start with a point of fear, but Tulsa's part of an albeit significant cog, but in a larger facet of this economy.
Yeah.
So UAS, especially as we were talking about earlier, we are playing catch up domestically in this space.
Totally
and
true.
there is a lot of innovation that's been offshored elsewhere, manufacturing that is taking place elsewhere. And for us to compete, we have to figure out how we seize this nationally and how Tulsa can be that catalyst.
Yeah.
But economies are more interconnected than ever. So being fearful of how, we create the change, and mostly how we weather the macroeconomic storm, which is innovation, even at our coasts. We are on the front line of something in which is a global event and a global war around this. So we need to make sure that, just to Justin's point there, that we seize this opportunity, but mostly that we're incredibly strategic, fast, nimble, and we satisfy not only the funding, but what is required to ensure that this economy and this innovation happens stateside.
Yeah, the urgency.
And I would agree with all of that. I'm new here. I just moved here 6 months ago, and
What?
Yep.
Hold on. What?
Yeah. And
That's hard to believe with the expertise that you,
and
with the cohesion this team has in 6 months.
Quick learner.
For you, that's wild.
yeah. But I would say thank you for that. I would say that from a hope perspective, coming in as an outsider, if you know Tulsa for anything, what do you know it for? Not around here. And the answer is, what I read about Greenwood and what I saw in the movie theater and, Killers of the Flower Moon. That's what I know about it, right? And so my hope, is that what we're able to do with this is do a script flip.
That's awesome.
And create a different story. I feel very strongly that the reason we got a big reason why we got the designation here and a double dip from the ladle is because of the partnership that we have with the Osage Nation, with Cherokee, with with Black Tech Street. And as I like to describe it, it's not a hand out or hand up, it's a handshake. Like literally it would not work without them.
Yeah.
So my fear then is kind of the flip of that, right? Which is, my fear is that even that's not enough, right? Just because you put together a great infrastructure and great cohesion and a great team, we still need a differentiator. We need something that says, well, if you're doing that in the UAS space, there's only one place to do it, and it's Oklahoma, right? And so emergent from this has to come our unique brand of this.
Yeah.
Right. And to your point about catching up, that's table stakes now. So how are we going to assert something that can only happen here in this space? And that's what I'm hoping will emerge.
That's awesome. Well, gentlemen, it has been fun. I don't know how we blasted through 30 minutes already, but we already did. Truly, truly. If you do want to get connected with Tulsa Innovation Labs, if you don't know what they, by now you know who they are and the awesomeness they're doing, how do they connect with you? Where do they reach out to? What do they look online?
Yeah, TulsaInnovationLabs.com, or they can go to TechHubTulsa.com. Perfect. To check out some of our Tech Hub's programming, what we're doing there. Definitely, if they're interested in all of our Tech Hub initiatives, which there are many, check out our blog series at TulsaInnovationLabs.com. Additionally, we're LinkedIn, all the socials.
Shoot us an email or text. We'd love to continue the dialogue with you and find out what you'd like to do.
Come build with us.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you accept carrier pigeons? Is that out?
I think
we could figure it out.
We figure out how to fly drones.
Yeah, I was about to
fly
say,
a carrier
we
pigeon.
accept drone messages, please. Yeah.
That's awesome. So
Right
good.
on.
Well, thank you again so much for tuning in to UAS the edge of UAS innovation right here with Kinsley Jordan. We'll join you next time. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Otherwise, you'll miss out on all the good info. We'll see you next time. I tell you what, that does not even begin to summarize how much fun it was actually in the studio, but holy cow, how much good info there was there. Again, if you have not taken the time, I encourage you, go to the websites that they recommended. Also, that'll be in the links for this podcast as well. If you have not followed along with us with Rethinking Vertical, you absolutely should. Make sure you subscribe, like, do all the things that you should do, that you need to do to stay with us, because the excitement is just beginning right here with the UAS cluster. Thank you again for joining us. Cannot thank you enough, and truly make sure that you follow along with us next time as we keep on bringing you right at the edge of what is Rethinking Vertical. We'll see ya.